right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Sex Sells podcast. We've taken a week off. We're back. We're feeling refreshed. Eliza was ill. Unfortunately, she's feeling better now. You feeling better, Eliza?
Yes, physically. No, I am all good now. I'm pretty lucky. I've actually not been sick in almost 4 years. That was the first time, and it was just a cold. So
Wow,
happy
4 years
days.
in the whole COVID period. You never
I've
had it?
never had no, never. So I was very isolated though. I didn't see anyone when I was pregnant because I was so scared of it. So I attribute it to that. But yeah, I'm all good, all healthy. How are you? Congrats on your show. I just forgot to mention we were talking before that you're doing a tour, a solo.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Just announced a solo stand-up tour. First one in nearly 5 years. So
Wow.
come along to that. Just to differentiate, most of the shows I spruik on this podcast are Comedy Untamed shows. So I'm at a lot of them, but that is a showcase of a lot of comedians. It's a bit of a side business that I run, but now I'm back to my solo tour as well. So it's called Villanera, and I didn't realize this, but Taylor Swift has a tour called Eras, and someone was saying, oh, you just called it Villanera, so you get the SEO, you get that Google search optimization. I never thought of that, but hey, look,
good.
hopefully I get a bunch of Swifties at the show. Look, if you're a fan of Taylor Swift's music, can't imagine there's a huge
This is the
crossover.
show for you.
But look, a bit edgier, not appropriate for Today FM at 4 p.m. But look, clever nonetheless. Naughty but clever. That's my comedy. So yeah, come to my show. neilkahacker.com/tickets. That's the site to get tickets. I'm doing all the capital cities in Australia, plus Canberra. Canberra obviously is the capital, but plus Gold Coast and Newcastle. I'm not doing Hobart, unfortunately, but all the other capitals and Newcastle and Gold Coast.
Wow. So did you have to do all the planning for this, finding all the venues and stuff on your own, or did you have someone do it for you?
Yeah, this is the first time I've managed a tour without anyone else. No manager.
Wow.
Nothing. Just me. And
Congratulations.
thank you.
Hustle.
Yeah, look, it's just a lot of admin. It's not really that difficult,
Yeah.
but it was good to get an insight on behind the scenes of solo stand up touring. I basically am just doing a lot of business in terms of comedy now, on top of the actual comedy, which is well, it's good. I mean, who else would be appropriate to do something like that other than someone who's been in the industry, being a comedian for 10 years? So.
Wow.
It's all going well. The shows are going well. The show in Brisbane's about to kick off. 6th July, I'll be at that one. Then it starts weekly from August. So we'll have a weekly show in Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane.
Oh my God.
And then on my solo tour happening at the end of the year. So yeah, a lot going on. Very exciting.
Wow. And how does your girl feel about you being away so much of the week?
I'm not like the solo tour is mainly I'll just fly to a city and then maybe stay there an extra night and come back. So
yeah, and
I'm sure she'll manage.
What about your Comedy Untamed? Is that you go to just not every single one?
I don't go to so I don't go to every single one of those, and I think I've managed in a way that I'm only skipping one of those. I think so.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, but the solo tour is the material I've been working on for pretty much the last couple of years, and it's all pieced together in one final album, if you will. This is an album for comedians, and then I have been trying it, bits and bobs here and there at the other shows, but look, the best show will be my solo tour, and then if you can't make it to that, come to the Comedy Untamed shows as well, or come to both.
Great.
Come to all of them.
Do both.
Have a great time.
For sure.
Yeah.
How exciting. Well done.
Thank you. How's Remy? In fact, this will lead into the topic conversation of today.
Remy is good. He's almost 10 months old, so that's pretty crazy.
Oh, it's gone so fast.
I know. It's so wild. He's really happy. He's crawling around, climbing everything, very active, very friendly. Every time I take him out, he goes and finds every child he can and kisses them, which is kind of cute. I'm loving it.
That's definitely your child.
Yeah, he's so affectionate. Such a grabs everyone, kisses, wants to cuddle. Yeah, it's funny. It's
That's
so
very
interesting
cute.
as well, like seeing him compared to other babies and like the differences between them and how it's like you wouldn't think that babies at this age have such unique personalities, but they truly do. It's wild. But yeah, I'm loving it. He's a
Okay.
happy boy. He's
What are
doing
some of the
well.
other? Before we go further, actually, I
Yeah.
should have said the topic at the top of the podcast. But we're actually this is very relatable because we're going to talk about the way parenthood is represented in popular art and media compared to the way career is represented. Because I've been observing a little bit of this, and
Mm,
it seems to me that we showcase the reality of parenthood. I've been watching a few films on Netflix and things like that in
mm,
regards to this. Whereas we seem to showcase the ideal of career. And these are very
mm,
broad concepts, but I just watched a film with Kevin Hart where he was a stay at home dad and the wife passed away just moments after giving birth. It was all very sad. But then they really showcase the reality of parenthood, the sleepless nights and the stress and the constant nappy changes and the baby vomiting and all these sorts of things. And it's a very nice story in the end. But
mm,
you don't really see that with the way career is often presented in the media. We just see the
mm,
ideal because
mm,
there's so much paperwork and admin and just boring, laborious work that we just don't see presented when it comes to career. So, um, tell me if you've observed a similar thing and if it relates
yeah.
to you personally.
It's so funny because when you said you wanted to do this podcast topic, I thought you were going to do the opposite where you're like, oh, parenthood is really glorified. And I was like, all I
Oh,
see on my TikTok these days is people making videos about the reality of being a parent. And it's almost like so impactful that people are like, maybe I won't have kids. Like it makes it out to seem so terrible. I get those videos constantly and I'm like, it's not that bad. But I also then wonder, like, well, how much of this is just my personal mindset on being not just being a parent, but my personality, where I'm like a water off a a duck's back kind of person. I don't get stressed very easily. I have a high stress tolerance, or maybe it's that like being a parent all of a sudden seems so demonized and so much more exhausting. And which of course it is. But yeah, it is really interesting. I've actually talked to a few of my friends about this because almost like everyone I know that has kids recently or is planning to have kids are saying like, I think I'm just gonna have one kid because it just seems impossible to have more than one. And when after I gave birth to Remy, I remember saying it on my podcast because my pregnancy and my birth was so like traumatic. I was like, I'm having one kid. And now I'm at the point now where I'm like, I want two, three, four. I want to have one more biological kid and then foster heaps of kids. Um, but I feel like
look
that's,
at you go.
yeah. Yeah, he's also at the cute stage though, so everyone's like, well, just wait till he's running around or he's a toddler, you'll change your mind again. But yeah, it is interesting. I think that a lot of the videos I show, which I kind of enjoyed, to be honest, like a little bit, were topics like the topic would be, or the caption would be, realistic day in the life of a stay-at-home mum of a 12-year-old, and then it just a 12-month-old, sorry, and then it would show the kid having like tantrum, crying, screaming, snot, nappy change, more tantrums. And then it would show the mum getting really stressed, taking a breath in the corner, coffee going cold. And I'm like, that is the reality, but that's also only like 20% of my day. But I also wonder, like, is this just a trend where it at one point it was glorified, where people would take all these photos and videos of their kid and use them like a prop and dress them up or whatever, and now they're like, no, let's be real. So they've gone too far the other way. But I don't know, it is interesting, and especially seeing the younger generation's response to this, being like, I don't want kids. I see those comments all the time, like, fuck
The younger
having
generation.
kids.
That's the first,
Yeah.
within the 10-minute mark of the podcast, you referred to people 5
Take a
years younger
shot
than
every
you
time.
as the younger generation.
Yeah, I honestly forget how like young we are sometimes still. And in my mother's group, I'm the youngest by like 3-4 years, and they've all just actually just found out that I'm still in my 20s, and they're all in their 30s, and I feel like I was like, I didn't even realize that either. I thought I was in my mid 30s as well. I just like forgetting. um, but yeah, that's a bit weird. But you know, sleep deprivation does weird things to your brain. But yeah, overall, I think it's there is definitely a way that it's changed how it's perceived. At least on social media. And I guess a lot of movies that have come out recently as well have been showing like the struggles, and a lot of it is, I would say, I mean, I haven't seen the Kevin Hart one, but a lot of it is towards women trying to balance work life, being a wife, being a mother, and all the household domestic chores and duties. And then people are like, well, why would I add so much more into my already full plate? Like, what is appealing about that? Aside from the fact you have a child and a family, like, what is actually appealing about this? So it is interesting. I don't know. What are your thoughts as a parent, as a childless non-parent?
As someone who's never had a child.
I mean, as far as you know.
Well, yeah, I just look at what is presented in popular art and media, and I relate to the observations you're making. Obviously, I'm not getting that same For You page of mothers talking about the specific reality, but I get a lot of, I wouldn't say a cynical view of parenthood, but sometimes almost borderline cynical and realistic view of parenthood. And it doesn't look appealing for someone who hasn't had kids. I look at that and I think, oh, okay. They don't look like they're enjoying it. That's the other big thing. A lot of these people who seem to be making these videos almost seem to be doing it as some form of, like a form of therapy almost. They're by showcasing how hard their life is at the moment, they maybe get a bit of release or something. I don't know. Or maybe, you know, like I said, I don't have babies or children, so by all means, you know, tell me if you're making those videos showcasing the realistic side of motherhood or fatherhood, what's going through your mind when you do something like that? Is it just about sort of sharing the reality, or is it more about giving yourself some kind of a release? It's very interesting because pre-social media, when I was a kid, I obviously wouldn't have been consuming parenting content then, but in Disney films and in teenage fiction and just in popular culture, generally it seemed like there was a very idyllic and positive view of parenting, almost to the point where it just seemed unrealistic. And like I said earlier, I would just make the comparison where I think there's now an unrealistic view presented of not just career, but a high, lavish sort of career. Yeah. Where on Instagram, people who are entrepreneurs, this is always the term everyone gives themselves, they'll show a photo of themselves at the Qantas lounge in a glamorous outfit, flying to a different city. And, you know, that's, as someone who does fly to different cities and run my own business, that's maybe 2% of the work. You know, 98% of it is admin and managing and a lot of stress. Where's the cash flow? What are we going to do next week? What are the ticket sales like? It's not how it's presented on Instagram, and I wonder how this is influencing people, younger people, when they're seeing that the ideal seems to be flying around, jet setting, wearing designer clothes, running your own business. When, what is it? Some exorbitant statistic where a huge majority of businesses fail, And you compare that to the way Parenthood is presented generally on social media, which is far more realistic, but oftentimes, I wouldn't say negative, but just tiring and, well, sometimes negative perception and view of how it's presented.
Exactly. And also, I find that not even just the traveling around, but just the romanticizing these crazy, like, you go out and you have all these team lunches, or even just the way your desk looks with the cute stationery. I see that's more
That's
like
just
female
nonsense.
centric I've seen.
Because, like, that day they've just sent like piles of emails and probably been yelled at by the boss.
Yeah, literally. And I know a girl who is she's a personal assistant. She gets paid a lot of money, and every day she's uploading like these humongous tables, like boardrooms of amazing food, cakes, alcohol, like all these things. And then behind the scenes, she's like, I literally just get abused all day, get yelled at, get all this shit dumped on me. And when you think about like people in marketing, or especially like real estate, when I dated someone in real estate, he was so proud to be in real estate, which I thought was great. And like, good for you. You should be proud if that's your thing. And he wore suits, like basically slept in a suit. He wore them so often. All his photos were suit. Like he glorified it so much. He made like videos on his Instagram stories, like showing off houses. But in reality, he was working like 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. 6 days a week. And I was like, when do you, like, this is your life? And every time I saw him, he was so stressed, so burnt out, had so much work to do, always texting with people negotiating or whatever, texting with the owners, like on call 24/7 basically. And it's like, well, it's funny to then go and look at his Instagram and be like, he's like, I'm living my dream. I'm doing this. Like, this is the life, working in luxury houses or whatever. And then behind the scenes, he's like, I haven't done anything for myself in 94 days. I haven't had a day off or whatever. So it is, it is interesting, but like also, and from personal experience, it's funny how it's always that grass is always greener side. Like when I worked in a really high intensity role with clients and going out and doing all these things and interventions and investigations, I would always like fantasize about working in a cute office job. Like, oh my God, what I would kill to just be a receptionist, like just do something in my mind that was more simplistic than what I was doing, where I could sit at a desk. And then I actually took still in the same industry, but in but basically a desk job, and I was there for 3 months because I was like, this is so fucking boring. Like, I need the action, I need the drama, I need the threats, I need the abuse. Like, put me back in the field. But I feel like it's so like that. And my brother is the same. He works in marketing at the moment and advertising, and he does really well. He makes a lot of money. He's really good at his job. But so many times he's gone and studied like random things. Like he went and did a PT course because he thought he would do that. He's really like crazy fit and active. And then he was like teaching BJJ, and then he's gone and studied. Now he's doing psych, studying psych as well. Always wanting to change his career. Oh, and he's applied to be like a fireman. Always kind of finding like that other thing that's really, I know he's ADHD, so he's like hyperfixates on random things at periods of time. But always like wanting the next, give me the next thing I could work towards, like, which I think I have those traits as well. And that's been something I've like missed, but also enjoyed missing out on since having a baby, like feeling like life is so slow and I'm really just enjoying this period of my life at the moment. But before I had a baby, I was always like, I need to be making an extra $10,000 every single year. I need to be making sure that I'm working up the ranks, which is hard to do in the realm of like therapy and social work and things like that, to make pay rises like that. But I was so pushy and I was so determined, and I was always like, and then I'd get there and I'd be like, what's next? When am I getting my next pay rise? When am I going to like push? And then it was only till like someone actually that was in my team, I employed her, and she was like 50. And she was like, you're 28 years old. Like, calm down, slow down. You know, I've been studied the same things as you, worked the same things as you. I'm 50 years old. Like, relax. You've got time to progress in that way. But and I was thinking of this, you know, when you come across people that are, this is getting a bit deep, but people that have are old or sick and unwell, and their life is threatened, or something happens, like a big traumatic event in their life, and they're like, why did I spend so much of my life just thinking what happens next? Like, where do I go next with this? Rather than living in the moment. And I think that social media glorifies so much of this hustle culture, and how amazing it is to be dedicating your entire life to a career and progressing yourself. I follow, of course, I'm going to bring up Reddit again, but I follow a subreddit called anti-work, and it's all about people being like, putting in boundaries with their workplace, like, hey, actually, I'm not going to be working past 5 o'clock unless you're paying me by the hour, and stuff like that. And then the retaliations they get. So it's super interesting. But yeah, I don't know. And one more comment I wanted to make as well, just I felt like I talked a lot of shit about people, mums that were like doing the realistic day in the life or whatever. But I think that one thing I've noticed about friends and family or people I know that have had babies recently is I'm pretty uncommon in the sense that I'm like the only person I know that actually joined a mother's group, whereas everyone else I know that has had babies hasn't joined mother's group. It's actually very uncommon, and even though I'm sure that they might have friends or family nearby, a lot of people don't. And so those videos provide solidarity to other women, where the internet becomes like their tribe, where they get that support from other women. And there's been so many times that I've seen videos where it's on both sides of the spectrum, with say, for example, baby sleep, which everyone knows I struggle with so much. I've talked about it 7,000 times. I'm so sick of talking about it. But like, I would see videos being like, here's my 6-month-old's nighttime routine. Give him a bath, read him a book. Then I lay him down in his cot and he sleeps to 8:30 a.m. Whereas me, I would do this amazing routine, and he'd sleep in 45-minute increments and like be up for 2 hours at 3 a.m. and that kind of stuff. And then being able to see those realistic, you know, in the middle of the night waking, I was like, thank God my baby's not broken. Like, it's just the reality of not, you know, all babies are the same. So I don't know, there's pros and cons to both, but yeah, it is really interesting to see how people are finding and looking at one lifestyle now being much more appealing than the other. And I feel like that's that career focus is looking more appealing, and it's interesting to see how much that has switched in the last like 10 or 20 years compared to what it used to be.
Look, people are, I mean, there's always been, particularly in the middle and upper classes, there's been a romanticization of certain career paths. I think back to, say, Sex and the City, that was very much a glorification of single independent career women loving their life. And funnily enough, I think the creator of Sex and the City has recently come out and said, I regret not having kids. So
wow, that's ironic. Interesting.
Yeah. And of course, I'm not trying to judge anyone who's making those videos. I would be just interested as to why they might be doing that. And even that sounds judgmental, but I just mean it in the sense of like, why does anyone post anything on social media? There's some sort of, like, when you're talking about that real estate agent, if he's not enjoying his life and having such a stressful time, why are you lying to the world? Why are you telling the world, look how good this is. Look at me in my lavish suit doing
Yeah.
$100,000 deals. The people who are actually enjoying their career aren't sitting there posting about it all the time. It's an insecurity thing, I would argue, because look, I'm not trying to brag or anything, but this was always my dream, to be a somewhat famous comedian touring the country and flying around doing shows. And I post about it, but not every single week saying, look at me here in the Gold Lounge or whatever. I just find that really cringeworthy, to be honest. I think once I posted when my first manager took me into one of those Qantas lounges, and I thought, oh wow, I made it. And then well, this actually sounds even worse. Well, now you're in those lounges, you're like, yeah, okay, cool. That sounds even more arrogant, actually. But the point is, I just don't feel the need to boast about that when, the reality is very different. There's still a lot of stress involved. Everything becomes a job after a while. You could be 3-4 years as having made it as an artist of some sort, and then eventually it just becomes a job. In the sense, I still absolutely love what I do. It gives me so much fulfillment and meaning, but the day-to-day process is work. It's waking up at a certain time, making sure that first getting the admin done, then writing jokes on this particular topic, then refining this, then planning. And look, once a year you get to do an amazing show at a beautiful theatre, and that's actually what I would post about on social media. But the stark reality is that it's not too dissimilar to anyone else's job. There's just a certain status that comes with it. And I suppose not so much on the individual inclinations of why people might be posting, but the macro effect of these two trends is that younger people see this sort of lavish, romantic, idyllic lifestyle presented in a career-focused entrepreneurial lens, and then they see this kind of dull, laborious reality of having a family. And how does that impact society on a mass scale? That clearly, to me, it would influence people to refrain from having children when they should still be able to make that informed choice, but then at least show the reality of both sides. Show the reality of what it's like in a high-powered law firm. You're getting yelled at all day, underslept. In both, look, pick your poison. You're gonna be lacking sleep either way. Pick your poison and be informed about the reality of what either situation would be like. I would guess a lot more people would then not want to pursue this kind of entrepreneurial, lavish lifestyle. I mean, even on some of these reality TV shows we watch, there's always someone there that's this boss who their first shot is them in a Lamborghini coming out in slow motion. If it's a guy, he's putting the sunnies on. If it's a girl, she's in a really fancy dress coming out. And look, half these people are in debt. They're all in debt. They've bought this car to impress their potential clients because they don't even have any. Because I know people like this, and it's sad. It's actually quite sad. And some are obviously very successful. But look, the Zuckerbergs and the Bill Gates of the world, they're not too autistic to worry about that stuff. They're sitting there like analyzing code all day. And the people who present this image of, look how successful I am. In the same way, someone who might be insecure about their body might be always presenting an image, oh, look how good my body is. In the same way, someone who might be insecure about their ability to attract women is always presenting, look at this, look at all these girls I'm with at the club. I would guess there's a form of projection from that insecurity coming with that posting.
Yeah, so true. This reminds me, one of my good friends back in the day, he's so lovely and so funny and so inexperienced with women. Never ever, I can't even just pinpoint his personality, but he just had no success with women. And we would go clubbing and he would just go up to attractive girls being like, can I have a photo with you? to 8 different girls a night and just upload the photos and his whole Instagram was just him and all these beautiful women. And I was like, he literally has never had a conversation with anyone, only ever said, can I have a photo? And 90% of the time they'd say no. I'd be like, what the fuck, no? But the ones that said yes, they're on his social media. Hilarious.
It's hilarious.
Yeah,
It's also it's sad.
yeah, yeah, it is. It is a little bit sad. But it is a really good point that I guess on a macro level as well, what is leading us to feel this need to kind of I don't think it's so much insecurity. I feel like it's more well, it can be in cases like that, but I feel like the flaunting is just it's vanity, and we as people are so narcissistic as becoming more and more narcissistic, where we think so much of us just ourselves and what benefits us rather than thinking outwards. And I don't blame people for that, because it's so hard to have a community in these days where everything costs money. There's no like free local activities. People don't volunteer anymore, where that used to be like a really big and trendy thing. Like that's no longer trendy, so people just don't do it. And it's hard to think. And also with the decreased amount of people having babies, where you actually, I'm not against that. If you don't want kids, please, for the love of God, do not have kids, because I worked with kids that weren't wanted, and it's devastating. But for people that don't have kids, sometimes you're even less likely to think about people other than yourselves or your immediate partner. And so and I was listening to a podcast from, I can't, sorry, you go.
Just a quick point I want to make is how much is the incidence of people not wanting to have kids due to the fact that we're just seeing the reality of those kids, as opposed to maybe some reality, some ideal, juxtapose that with some ideal and some reality of a career. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, well, that's a really good point as well, because if you go on the subreddit On the Fence, where it's literally people that are on the fence about having kids, one of the biggest reasons for not wanting to have kids is, and I think this is fair, but it is interesting, is that they don't want to have to make sacrifices. They don't want to give up certain aspects of themselves. They like that they can go and travel. They like that they can party. They like that they don't have to think about anyone other than themselves, as in organize someone's life. And I do think that is a fair assessment, because I was thinking about this actually on my walk today, that since having a baby, my entire life has been like all I think about. And I'm still breastfeeding. I'm still like, he's only 10 months old, so it's like still new. So I think a lot of this is hormonal, but like 90% of my thoughts are like, how can I make Remy's life and Remy's childhood just like amazing? And and then I was noticing about myself, like, well, it's crazy how much like almost my whole personality now is like not my personality, but I guess my motivation is about raising a child. And I can understand why some people are like, I don't want that. And of course, not everyone that has a kid is like that. Like most of my mother's group, or most of the people I know that had kids or babies recently, went back to work literally a few months after having a baby, and it's almost like their life is normal. They just come home and pick up their baby, whereas I'm with mine 24 hours a day. So it's different in that aspect. But what I found interesting about this On the Fence forum is a lot of people were saying like, I've been on the fence since I was 24, and me and my husband talks about it, and now I'm 40 years old and I'm still on the fence. And I'm starting to realize from reading all these posts that sometimes you're never going to be off the fence. Sometimes you're never going to have that clarity on, should I do this or should I not? It's just not going to come. And it's one of those, it's a gamble. It is truly a gamble. And there's other, like I see on occasion people talk about how I love my children more than anything, but I actually don't love being a parent. And that's like a hard, it's a very vulnerable thing to say, hats off to them, but also imagine that child seeing their parents say that, or hearing them say that and making a video go viral about it on the internet. But then it's positive in the saying that so many parents might relate to that. It's just, It's crazy. It's a lot. It's hard.
It's very.
You never know, especially when like so much of it falls onto one person. Like as much as a father or alternative partner is involved, if one of you is working, the majority of the parenting is going to fall to the parent that isn't working.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's almost always still the mother.
Yeah,
I haven't looked at statistics, but
yeah,
seems like it still is. And how much of it is also just the option paralysis that we're dealt with today compared to 50, 60 years ago, where there was no real option on the table. You just had kids. That was what everyone did. And there mightn't have even been birth control, so you're probably going to have them regardless.
Yeah.
And to fit into the community, you had to get married. And as controlling as that was, it was a way to organize communities and build a social framework. And now we're stuck with this, cosmopolitan, secular world where the options are endless. You can, well, they're not endless per se, but you can do that. You can go and be the career person. You don't even have to do that. You can work 2 days a week for the rest of your life, and for the other 4 days of the week, go just be out in nature, and that can be your life. You can have 10 kids if you want. There's no social code telling you exactly what you should do with your individual life, and maybe that's causing this pervasive level of anxiety among our generation. And ironically enough, if there actually was a pathway forward that everyone just undertook, it might alleviate some of that anxiety for a lot of people who may not want that burden of liberalism, of the freedom to do all those things, because that freedom can actually be anxiety provoking, because these are huge decisions, and maybe we're better off not making those decisions, and there's just some sort of traditional wisdom that makes those decisions for us. I was listening to a podcast about Israel, and look, there's a lot of things wrong about Israel, but there's a very high birth rate in Israel, and it's not a developing country. There's a portion of Israel that's extremely religious, but still a majority that would be secular Jews. So they partake in all the traditions and things like that. But when they're asked specific questions, how much does the belief in God mean to you? A lot of them might say, I don't necessarily believe in a God as such, but I do the traditions. My family are culturally Jewish, and they still have a lot of children. They have quite large families on average, and the theory behind that is because there's this 10% of ultra-Orthodox Jewish people who are having an average of 6 children each. And then the people around them might also be having just maybe the average 2 or 3 children. But it's just so normal in that society to have children that you don't really think about it. Instead of thinking, do I want children? You think, oh, okay, when do I have them? And maybe that's bad because there are people who might not have the personality that's appropriate for child rearing, who are sort of implicitly forced into it. Or maybe it's good because then there isn't this option paralysis of, I need to make this huge decision before I'm 30. And then if it's after 30, then, it's suddenly becoming panic stations and we have to make that decision quickly. And I don't know, what if I do this? What if I do that? It's a lifelong commitment. And, it's anxiety inducing to have to make that choice.
I think you're right on the money with the option paralysis. And even though I was just saying before that, people can struggle to think outside of themselves and they're self-serving, I think another really big part that I guess contradicts that, but is people that are so selfless that they think, like, I've had so many messages, or I know so many people, and I see online so often people saying things like, I've got bipolar, even though I'm medicated, supported, should I not have a child? Or I have BPD, or I have chronic anxiety. Am I going to be able to, not even just because of the it may be genetic or hereditary. What if it's just too hard for me to handle? I don't want to, put my child through anything like that, which I think is really selfless and great to consider. But
Absolutely.
I do see option paralysis, and the fact that, our society is we're in such like an anxious time, and mental health mental health illness is just continuously growing, and becoming more of an issue. And people are like, I've got to sort my shit out before I can even think of, children. And you made an interesting point as well about wanting people to not have to make the decision themselves. Like, you almost want to ask someone else, like, can you tell me, should I have kids or not? Because society is telling me I can do what I want, but what do I do? And that's why people go to psychics and things like that, because
Well, fair enough. Yeah.
it's just, they're like, I need someone, because a therapist isn't going to tell me. I need a fucking psychic to tell me or something.
How much of the mental health crisis is because of these eternal options that we face?
Yeah.
Could that be actually exacerbating? Ironically enough, we have all this freedom now, but that freedom is not, we're not used to that. We don't know what to do. And
I think 100%. And it's not just applying to children, obviously. Like, how often have I had conversations and people talking to me and messaging me saying, like, my partner's really great, I love him, but is this the best? Like, could I be doing better? And to be honest, like, to be frank and really honest, like, when I was younger, I did the same thing in my early 20s, being like, well, I'm in a good relationship, but I want to know what else is out there, and I want to know if, like, I can feel even more intensely or more passionately or whatever. So I would date for 3 years, leave the relationship, date someone for 3 years, leave the relationship, date someone for 2 years. I did it heaps up until basically this current relationship, or when I was in my mid-20s and I was like actually studying and relationships and counseling and behavioral science and things like that. And I was like, oh my God, I see the pattern here. But it is that, like, the grass is always greener. Yeah. Can I be doing better? Oh, well, now I have the capacity to divorce, which, by the way, I obviously completely support. But it's so common and it's so normal that people are like, well, let's just split up. I'm not feeling as passionate about someone. So rather than it being like we're breaking up because there was, violence, abuse, manipulation, or disloyalty, betrayals, etc., it's breaking up because my heart just wasn't with him anymore, or something, which, I don't want to invalidate that, because I've done that so many times and I have no regrets about it. But it is also that mentality of nothing is permanent and there's so many options out there, and do we always desire the better option? Are we always thinking about something else? So I think it's like a really good life lesson is, like, the grass is greenest where you water it. Think about that all the time. And
that comes back to that Esther Perel sentiment, where she talks about how in modern secular life we don't just expect a partner, a romantic partner. We want someone who's a best friend, a spiritual confidant, also a romantic partner, someone that can sort of excite us sexually. And we put all this emphasis on this one person that no one can fulfill. Absolutely no one can fulfill all those things. So that's the $1 million question. How do we, in this very seemingly progressive liberal world, how do we alleviate some of that option paralysis without controlling people and not still giving them the choice? I don't know how you do that. That's a big question that society needs to answer.
Yeah, I wouldn't even know the answer to that. Yeah, that's a really hard thing, because I was going to say, my first thought was, instead of thinking 5-10 years, just take one day at a time and really be present. But you can't do that when you're thinking about children or major career changes or whatever. You can't just be like, Today I've decided I want a baby.
Yeah, yes, you can't back out of that.
Yeah, well, you can, but there's potential trauma aside,
True.
you know.
Yeah, you don't want to do
So
that.
that's hard.
What would you, in a more micro context, what have you talked about your policy with Adrian if, say, Remy wants to do something that when he's a teenager, drugs or something like that, where, do you
Yeah.
let, you have to give children some space to make their own mistakes, but some of those mistakes
Yeah.
are so severe that you have to just put your foot down as a parent and say, no, 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 you just simply can't do that. Where do you draw the line there, or where do you plan to draw that line?
I feel like I've got all the plans for this. We talked about this so
Okay.
much, but I know that I actually have never done drugs ever. Nothing, not even a cigarette, because I have such an addictive personality that I knew that as a kid as well, that I just never went near anything because I knew I would get hooked. If I like something, I know I'll get hooked. I've always been like that. And Adrian, he has a similar personality, but he did everything. So he was one of those like stoner kids. And that I think really like fucked him up a lot as a teenager. And it was really hard, and it really excelled his anxiety as well. So I would plan to say to Remy, if you want to experiment with drugs, don't inject yourself with anything. At the bare minimum, just don't inject yourself. Experiment. There's a lot of things you can experiment with before that. Know where your drugs come from. Know who you're sourcing it from. I'm not going to get them for you. For you, your grandparents might. No, kidding. But I would, I would just be really realistic, being like, if he is predisposed to have ADHD, which he is, based on my family and Adrian having ADHD, I would say that there is more likely that you could potentially become addicted to these substances. It's more likely that it will have a different impact on your brain than it could your friends that don't have this. And this is the reality of it. And also, if you want to do drugs at home, please do, like, if you're going to like experiment with drugs that are mind altering, please do them at home, or share your location or something like that with me, just in case. And finally, my parents always told me when I was growing up, they basically told me, if you want to do drugs, like, do it safely. Same messages. And my mum was like, this one's shit, don't do this one. And I never did. I had so much freedom.
Wow.
As a teenager, I never had to run away, because I would just say, I'm heading out or whatever. And I didn't do anything bad ever, because I had that, like, my parents were like assertive, firm and assertive, but they also knew the realities of what it's like to be a teenager. And I never did anything bad. So, and they always told me, no matter what time it is, no matter where you are or what you've done or what mistake has happened, call me and I'll come get you. Like,
Yeah,
there's
that's nice.
yeah. So I would plan to do the same. Like, I have, especially with boys, I think are slightly more likely to take more, do more risk-takey decisions. So I have to accept the
Risk-takey.
reality of it. Risk-takey, more risky decisions. So that's the reality. They're going to experiment with things. I think the thing I'm going to be the strictest on is, as a teenage boy, you're going to be so horny and hormonal. Please don't make impulsive decisions about sex with girls, and don't manipulate girls saying you have feelings for them and things like that if you're just trying to get laid. I think that'll be the thing I'm really strict about, is how he approaches sex with, his peers. That's going to be something I'm really hone in on.
Yeah, it sounds like a tricky one, particularly with teenagers, because it's in their nature to rebel.
Yeah.
And they may not understand. And you can rationally articulate, hey, this is why drugs are bad. This is why sugar is bad. This is why all these things are bad. But they may not be able to fully comprehend that. They may say, yeah, I understand that it's bad, but they also have a much more impulsive mindset. So they're going to do it. They're going to do a lot of those things. And you have to sort of allow them some space to do that. But
Exactly. And things like, not drugs, but I wouldn't source drugs for my child, but things like alcohol. If Remy came to me and said, I'm going to drink at this party, I'd be like, I'll get you alcohol because I don't want him getting a bottle of vodka or something. Or I would be like, I'd get him a 6-pack of beer. That's what my parents did for us when we were like, we're going to drink.
My mum did that. By the time
They
I
just
was like
bought us alcohol.
17, yeah.
Yeah. We were like
Probably
12.
very
No,
uncomfortable
kidding.
for them to do that because if I had a 16-year-old, because you sort of, you think, okay, if I don't do it, they're going to source it from some potentially worse vendor, and it's better I just buy it and tell them, look, this is still bad for you, don't drink too much, but look, you have to make those mistakes yourself sometimes.
Yeah. I think that's the best thing, that when I worked at a youth center and we would give out free condoms, I had a line of boys coming up to me trying to get condoms, and I'd be like, you guys can have as many of you want as you want, but you have to listen to my safe sex talk beforehand. And that was the deal. And that's what I would take that approach with alcohol. I'm not going to be like, you can have as much as you want, but if you want me to source you alcohol, you're going to have this conversation with me. And if you want to go on the pill, if I have a girl, or if Remy's girlfriend in the future asks me about that or whatever, or you want condoms, we're going to have this conversation. I'd have, actually, my children will have condoms on access regardless, even if I don't think they're getting laid, they're going to be there.
That's worse. If he can't get laid, and then he's like, oh, my mom got me condoms and I can't even use them. So that, I would guess most parents would agree with that general sentiment where you have to allow children to make some mistakes themselves, but then have boundaries where they need to be. So, there'd be some drugs, maybe, all right, if you want to do weed when you're 16, okay. Still, this is why it's bad. This is why, ideally you should do it. But look, a few of your friends are going to do it and it's probably going to be too hard to say no. But then, you're not going to let them experiment with ice or something like that. That's a hard no where you just absolutely cannot do that. And what you said is correct. Look, if that were to happen, I'm always there and you need to know that and you should always tell me, but also don't do it. That's a tough conversation. Yeah, I wouldn't know how to do that. Do not envy the parents who unfortunately have teenagers who are in that situation. But see, that's the sort of micro scale at which that's occurring. How do we implement that on a macro level where some people might be making really bad decisions? And we don't want to just restrict there's a need for criminal laws if it's violence and whatnot, but how do we say when it comes to decisions such as spiritual decisions and family, career, these sorts of things, if someone's clearly got a very unhealthy relationship with their job and it's hurting them and also hurting the people around them, but their narrative might be, oh, look, this is what I want to do. This is fulfilling. Is it possible to emphasize that kind of sentiment on a macro scale where we allow people a boundary of freedom, but then there's just an area where culturally, if you go, that's out of bounds? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's really tricky, I guess, because every avenue will have its own solution. Like with work, that's why HR exists and things like that. My friend works in, I don't know, like what the organization, like workers' comp basically, and she said that it's crazy what they can get people paid for. Like she has a client that's getting 10 years of a salary because she was put on a performance plan, felt it was unjust, and then had ongoing PTSD and stress from that. And because she had to work heaps of hours to meet the requirements of the performance plan, which goes for, I think it was like 6 weeks or 12 weeks, something like that. And now is getting paid year after year after year because of the ongoing stress for that, which is like, it's one of those things that if you implement more, people are going to take advantage of that. Not saying this person has, But there's so much capacity for that, especially with the rise of anxiety and mental illness combined with work stress. And there's so many recipes for disaster. It's a really hard thing to, I guess, overcome. And it's one of those things as well that this is why life skills needs to be taught from a younger age, like in high school, and people need to know more about careers and tax and family and or whatever, and or even in university or tertiary studies. Like I had to in my degree, which was counseling and behavioral science. I went to the University of Notre Dame, and they have this compulsory thing that you have to study alongside it. I can't remember the name. I think it was called like Logos or something like that, which basically was like philosophy and theology. And it was like this compulsory course you had to do my entire degree. It was such bullshit and it was so boring. And I'm like, if you're going to make something compulsory, make it interesting. Like make it like be life skills or something like that. It's so essential. And what's funny actually is that some of my clients that were in the kids I worked with that had intellectual disabilities or delays would be in the support unit, and as part of the support unit in these schools, they teach them life skills like how to get on a bus, how to use money, how to open a bank account or whatever. And the irony was that these kids that had these disabilities finished high school knowing more about these things than the children that didn't have any disabilities, because their school didn't teach them any of that because they didn't deem it necessary. And it's fascinating, like for most people that go on to tertiary study, you're making like these lifelong decisions, or what could be lifelong decisions that at 18 years old or 17 years old or earlier, being like, okay, well, I'm just going to study this. And then if you change your mind, you're $36,000 in debt based on this degree that you don't want to go to waste. It's such the system is really hard. I mean, in an optimal world, education would be free, so there's more opportunity to change career. And if you were on the wrong path or you regretted it or whatever, it's I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, on just the education sector, I think there's too much emphasis placed on tertiary education, and I think for most jobs you don't need a degree, and you can learn on the job, or you can do a 1-year TAFE course or something like that. And what's happened is the value of a degree is less than what it used to be, because so many people are being pushed into degrees because the universities want to make money. And then this is also an issue with the poor business model of the universities, and then they rely on international students, so they have to decrease their standards to push all these international students through, because they're paying 3 to 4 times the tuition of a local student. So the whole education system is a mess, and it's the incentives are not appropriate for just actually educating people as best as they possibly can. Having said that, I never actually went to university. Well, there you go. I'm doing all right. So I suppose to conclude, look, a lot of these things are just natural cultural phenomena that you can't really force to change, because once you give people freedom, if it so happens that a lot of parents are using that freedom to showcase the reality of parenting, and then a lot of people who might be pursuing a lavish, high-flying career are just showcasing the ideal of that as opposed to the reality that is occurring and that is having flow-on effects. But I don't know how we control something for that. But I just, I'd like to. I think it would be cool if more parents showed a mix of the reality and also not necessarily something that's unrealistic, but when they have those really nice family photos, or even when you post, you got Remy with the dog and Adrian. That's very sweet. That's very cute. That is a very positive depiction of family life. And then I also think people can post about the reality of a career, because a lot of people are being manipulated into thinking this is just this awesome boss lifestyle. You just get to fly around in sexy corporate attire and make decisions and make six figures, and it's just nonsense. I mean, there's some jobs that are like that, but even those, you'd find the reality is starkly different to how it's presented on social media. So don't take those posts at face value. I think, and most people sort of know this when you tell them that. They think, yeah, I know that's all unrealistic, but because like what we talk about a lot, the way that these images are affecting our emotions and consistently affecting our emotions, we almost have this unconscious desire to want to emulate that. And
exactly.
and that's the power of media. That's the power of art. But it's manipulating you. All these entrepreneurs on Instagram. Look, I guarantee you, their life is not what it's made out to be. So be reasonably skeptical.
I can't remember where I heard this, or maybe you told me this, but we were talking about it in a podcast ages ago, about how people from banks were saying in Australia as well that young people take out like credit cards and of 30 grand or whatever, and put themselves in massive debt, buying themselves a car, getting an apartment and putting like crazy nice furniture in it to help kickstart. Like they're like, if you want to be successful, then you got to start dressing successful kind of mentality, or trying to kickstart that influencer lifestyle by looking like they're rich. And I saw this video today on TikTok, which I thought was really good, of this. She's not like a body positive type influencer. She's just a random, like she's an influencer on TikTok, but she doesn't have your, ideal body. She's just got a normal body. And she posted a video at the beach being like, just looking around at the beach, and there's no one here that has those like Instagram model bodies. Everyone here just has a normal body. And even though as women and on social media, etc., we're always seeing these body positive accounts, and we understand the impacts of face tuning and editing, but you still forget, like, even though you know those things, you're still being influenced by constantly seeing these perfect ideals on your social media. Even though you're aware of that's not realistic or whatever, you're still subconsciously being influenced. That was one of the best things I actually did. Like, I did it like 10 years ago or a bit less, but I unfollowed everyone on Instagram that I thought was something that made me feel insecure or made me feel jealous or whatever. Even things that I was using being like, this will motivate and inspire me because they're really attractive or they're doing this or whatever. I was like, no, I'm unfollowing them. Like, if they're not making me feel, they're not actually helping me or educating me. I basically followed only accounts that I thought were like funny, educational in terms of like psychology and relationships, or friends and family. Like, and it was a massive change in my own mental health, but before that I was following a lot of like fit gym women and attractive influencers just because I was always curious about their lifestyle and all the things they were doing. And now I don't follow anyone like that.
Yeah, there's on the male side, all these money gurus have a similar effect where a lot of them are in debt and they take out a loan to start their course, and then their course is what eventually gets them out of debt and into profitability. So everyone's being manipulated, really. Like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. They say, "Hey, look, I can show you the way." And look, any kind of honest accumulation of wealth is going to take a long time, and it's not for everyone. Like 80 to 90% of people should be living what would otherwise be considered a normal life. They just get a normal, regular job. Not everyone can be an entrepreneur, and go get a side business, and then maybe if that's successful, then you can think about, I can do this full time. But it's not something you just jump into. Like with any life skill, you'd have to show some sort of talent for that when you're a child and a teenager, and then maybe that could be the life for you. But it's very risky, and there's often a lot of debt involved and a lot of uncertainty and often more work the lavish lifestyle is shown, but there's often more work going on behind the scenes. So just this idea that normality is insignificant, or it's not something that you know, that's not your full potential, because there's all this kind of, a lot of American media talks about this, and I understand how people who have, you know, quote unquote made it want to promulgate this narrative that if you just work hard and you aim for the stars, you can become the big star, you can become the big UFC fighter or whatever it might be. But that's, look, statistically, we're looking at 0.001% of people that are going to do that. And the sad thing is 1% of people will work very hard and dedicate themselves to getting to that point. And of that, an even smaller percentage will actually get there. And it's not for everyone. And it's almost like a Ponzi scheme where if everyone's kind of buying into that, well, just living what could be considered a normal life actually becomes more valuable in a way, because no one's doing that. So people need just, you know, like if anything goes wrong in society, what do you need? You need people who can fix things at the end of the day. You don't need, well, you don't need me. I'm not going to be any help. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Yeah. It might be, the pendulum might be swinging. We'll see.
I think so, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to that one, everyone. Let us know your thoughts if you're watching on YouTube. And any final thoughts from you, Eliza?
I don't know. I feel like I'm leaving this having an existential crisis, being like, don't follow your dreams. But I think that, you know, not to get all spiritual, but what's meant to be for you will be for you. And sometimes you need to make those mistakes and go into debt and whatever and fuck up or gamble it and risk it to have that potential great. But maybe that potential great dream is not for everyone. Like, everyone I know has a dream of opening up a little cute cafe. I swear everyone I know. And what's the stat? It's like less than 30% of cafes that open up stay open after a year. You know, just that, be that realistic. Like, it's great to be a dreamer. I know I'm a dreamer and I make rash decisions because of that. And, you know, I always feel like I'm lucky and it's worked in my favor. But yeah, be realistic and know your risk. Be ready to lose the things that you want to risk it. And if you're going to leave a stable job to start up your own company or whatever, be prepared to lose everything or gain everything.
And then when you do gain everything, be prepared for the spiritual realization that comes, which is, happiness comes from within.
Yeah. Actually, I don't like this hustle and bustle. Yeah. I want to go back to my desk job.
I was just unhappy all along, and I need to find that happiness within.
That is actually a really good point to end that on, actually, a final thought of that. You're always seeking something else.
Oh, literally. I remember my whole dream was to perform like a sold-out show at the Enmore Theatre, and then I did it, and I just couldn't get out of bed the next day because I was like, oh. Wow. Yeah.
What was your feeling? Like, I've done it? Or were you like, it wasn't as great as I thought it would be?
It's a combination of a lot of things. Like? I don't even know. It was just a combination of a lot of things. But then it really did. That's when I started actually reading a lot of books in other topics such as relationships and this sort of stuff that has probably led to this podcast, ironically. So, yeah, it's not all it's cracked out to be. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely love, you know, that was a fun show and I love doing what I do. But, what you talked about at the start, that constant need for more and then you're chasing the validation at the end of the day. You're not really chasing. If you love what you do, it doesn't matter if you're performing to 20 people or 2,000. You love what you do. And the people who have that feeling, they know.
Mm-hmm. True that. All right, on that note, I need to go have some serious reflection.
Oh, no, you're fine. What do you need to reflect on?
I don't know. My brain's like, I don't know. I don't feel like I need to reflect on anything. I always feel like no matter what is going on in my life, no matter what's fucked up or going great, I always think this is exactly where I need to be. And to be honest, I actually love that I think that about myself, because when things are really bad, I'm like, I still think this is exactly what needed to happen. And then something great will happen 6 years later or something. And I'll be like, see, that's why that happened back then.
I love that.
I'm an optimist.
No, that's great.
Which has a lot of benefits, I think. But yeah.
That's something an optimist would say about being an optimist.
Exactly. Yeah, true.
All right. Well, it got pretty deep at the end. Well, thank you for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.